I'm Paul Shrell Fox. I'll be doing a course on Jewish themes in films made in the United States other than Woody Allen films. The first session or so that we'll discuss is why is film such a powerful media to begin with? What is it the nature of the people who watch the films that gets them drawn in and sucked in? After all, we know that the people who are on the screen, when they're crying, they're paid to cry. On the other hand, while they're doing this, we all cry along with them, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse. But what is it about the film in and of itself that draws out that response? And even more so, or even more importantly, what is it about the people who are watching it? What is it about our neurological and psychological makeup that brings us this type of reaction to things that we know we are more than an arm's length away from? And when we have interactions with people who are close to us, who are a little further away from us, we have these emotional reactions. But why should, for example, when Barbra Streisand sings in Yentl, why do we all get so emotionally involved? And it's not just because she has a beautiful voice. It's something else that goes on in our brains. And so one of the films that I want to talk about will be Yentl. It's a story about women studying Torah. There are all sorts of other things that also are very interesting in that movie. What happens when a man and a woman, a young man and a young woman, are alone in a room together? And even more so, because the beginning of that story is that he doesn't know that she's a she. What is it about this nature of the hevruta, when people study together, that it can turn into this intimate relationship that seems to throw things off along the way? Another movie that I think is very interesting is called Jacob the Liar. Jacob the Liar is probably a little less known movie that Robin Williams did about humor during the Holocaust. It's a remake of an older movie, and it touches on very poignant issues, and we'll probably talk about that as we approach Holocaust Memorial Day, to see how the Jews, we all know they use music and humor. But what is it about Jews in particular, or people in general, that allow us to laugh at our very dark situations? And how does that help us deal with those emotions? Not all the films we choose will have specifically Jewish themes. A film like Avalon, where the European immigrants who move to the United States in the 40s and 50s, when we watch it the first time, we all think that those are Jews. In fact, they're not. They're Germans who are coming to the United States. Yet a lot of the themes that emerge from our own histories of coming to the United States in that time come out in that very movie. Other movies that came off the top of my head while thinking about this is movies like The Lion King, right? The return to the Pride Land, the return to the homeland. How much does that come out, and how much can we use that as a Jewish theme, even though it has nothing to do with Jewish people in particular? Other movies that have specifically Jewish themes, like The Chosen. What is it when a Haredi meets baseball? What happens when you have to do that and you have to deal with that type of clashing of cultures? Another movie is Meg Ryan's A Stranger Among Us. What happens when an insular population, like the Haredi population, gets investigated by people who are outside of that system? It's something that happens today. It's something that's very critical that happens today. And in terms of the system itself, there are very serious issues when you bring in somebody who is from the outside. It touches a little bit on what we call and what we're familiar from Din Moser. What happens when you give somebody off to somebody who isn't of the Jewish legal system? And there are all sorts of issues that come up with that as well. I don't want this to become a course where we say this group of Jews are bad and this group of Jews are good, but I want to take a look at what happens when we are insular, because I think all sorts of cultures have that sense of wanting to save themselves. If we're daring, there's a new movie that came out in 2017, I think, called Disobedience. It's sort of the female version of the documentary called Trembling Before God. Things like The Little Mermaid also can come up in terms of what happens when we deal with issues of intermarriage. So those are the kinds of issues that will come up. Those are the kinds of issues that we'll talk about. We'll talk about sibling rivalry and what do we know about birth order. Everybody knows that the oldest is one way and the youngest is another way, but it turns out that we can't really prove that. We can't really take a group of fourth graders, give them personality tests, and know who is born first and who is born third and who's the middle child. So it turns out that a lot of the things that we know because we decide that we know them intuitively, we'll look at them and see if there's any type of psychological data that supports it, or any type of halachic or Jewish textual support for some of the things that we see that we say, those kinds of things will never happen. What we'll do is, if I'll bring the theoretical introduction, I'll bring the first movie, we'll find a way for us to all deal with the technological aspects of watching the movies, and then we'll have a discussion in the first or second sessions about other movies that we want to watch and study together. Thank you.